welcome to the NDSS 30th anniversary, as we call it, anniversary track. It's a specific track that some people from the steering committee and organization community has prepared for you. My name is Ahmad Reza Sadeghi, and I am from Technical University Darmstadt in Germany. And today we are going to touch upon a number of interesting aspects that relate to NDSS. Why NDSS? Why you are here? I think most of you know why you are here. But also a bit deeper, so to say, deep dive into the NDSS history. And my colleagues have prepared together with me a number of hopefully interesting stuff for you, and also for us, because that was also new to us. So the structure of this track would be like this. I first talk about NDSS in general, but also those whom we should actually thank for having such a top conference with specific characteristics. And then Ben, David, Karen, and Matthias will continue with other facts and figures about this conference. And I think specifically for PhD students and young faculty members who are just into the ambitions and they want to be promoted and do anything that they want to do, it's important to take your time. Is it some surprises for you today, and just put away your mobile phone if possible, or laptop. You can always do it after this session. Or when you had your cocktails after the celebration. That is much nicer to work with, at least from my point of view. And so take your time for these things, because people put, let's say, invest and some effort in it to prepare that. And then at the end, we have a panel with some respected, fantastic colleagues of us, that they are going to provide their insight to what they have in our community. And I hope that you like it, because we also want to have fun. We don't want to make it too serious. So let us first start with NDSS vision. So as you have all heard, Carrie started in the opening as general chair, explaining where NDSS is coming from, and David is going to deep dive into that. But actually in 1993, even before I started to think about doing a PhD and giving up my job in industry, people were thinking about securing internet, that one day internet will become a monster that you have to take care of all kinds of security aspects in it. So a bunch of people with visions, and today it's really hard to find these people with engagement, started to think about, okay, one day our connected system will be very complex. It will be with heterogeneous device landscape. Decentral infrastructure, think about all these blockchain papers that we have to accept in this conference, yeah? And also human aspect. And recently, because of geopolitical tensions, we have satellite research, cybersecurity in space, not in metaverse, in real space. And there are also new threats that seems to only concern United States, and these are the ballooning, the threat of balloons. Okay. Now, given this vision, David was so kind, because he, I think, archived a lot of things about NDSS that is funny to see it afterwards. I want to show you the PC, so program committee of NDSS 1999. Okay, we can debate about the fashion at that time. We can also debate about the fact that maybe one of the conditions for being a program committee member is to have a mustache or beard. And I could really sneak in very, very easily. So And if you see David in the middle, he is sitting or doing something else, I don't know, I cannot see it in this picture. And then a young, attractive man is going to talk about the figures and facts. And behind him you see Steve Bellowin, because it is interesting that many years after these guys started with NDSS, I had the privilege to get to know some of them, to work with some of them, and I admired Steve Bellowin always because of his creative mind, and he also looked like a cute IT security Santa Claus. So you cannot really, you always have to love him. Anyway, so NDSS is a special conference among the top 4. It's a global platform of excellence, as I think you can see with the quality of many papers that are presented in this conference and the conferences previous to this one. You can come here because of the special character of this conference. It is intimate. You will see in a video that we are going to present to you that actually all top security researchers talk about NDSS. You can come here and talk about your problems and improve your ideas by talking to more experienced people. On the other hand, when you have a paper at NDSS and you are proud of it, even if you work with 12 co-authors from 4 specific countries when you reveal to us, you still can, so to say, finish your PhD. Your supervisor hopefully is happy, you are happy, and then you have plenty of career options in front of you. Tech companies want you. Research institutions, they even provide money and funding for cocktail sessions to recruit you by giving you a lot of alcohol. But all these things are possible today because of the work and investment of a number of people. You may not be able to see all of the names, but these are people who started with NDSS, continued, they went through ups and downs, and it doesn't matter what was their motivation for accepting a function or a service, a specific task in this conference, whether it was, I don't know, fame or academic fame, I don't think that it was about money, or any other aspect of satisfying your ego, they really stepped in and worked, and we have now a conference where you can be very proud to have a paper on it, and many students work maybe even 1 year, even sometimes with or without the 12 other collaborators to have a paper here at NDSS. So one question was, how do we actually celebrate NDSS anniversary? Okay. It's a celebration, usually celebration, yeah, you have a party, music, and I recognize that the recent or new generation after me, they are much more serious than my generation. We had lots of parties. You guys don't party, but at least write more papers, hopefully. So it was difficult to think what can we do. This is why the steering committee got together and they started to brainstorm, and they had lots of ideas, from very interesting ideas to crazy ideas to even crazier ideas. So, and at the end we had to make a compromise. So we made a subcommittee, and then at the end we had a decision, and the decision was to go and interview all those people who were building up NDSS as PC chair or general chair. But as you saw the list, it was really impossible to get them all in, so to say, in one place. So what can you do? You start with with the tools that you know the best. And the pandemic forced us to use Zoom. And with all problems that Zoom has, I wrote emails to, 30 people, And some of them answered, some of them, they are not working in this area anymore. Some of them, they don't want to even talk to anyone. But most of them reacted. And some of them I didn't even know their emails, and David helped a lot. And we also looked into LinkedIn, and I sent a lot of messages to get them to an interview. And we had all these problems, pet running problems, baby coming into the Zoom call, all these kind of things. And at the end, we made it to interview these people who were very influential in security community worldwide. Most of them you know. They have produced a lot of PhDs in their career, who themselves became people who have either decision-making positions, or they are in faculty, as a faculty members, are working on universities and training other PhDs. And in the course of all these interviews, we started to ask a lot of questions. Questions were usually softball questions, because we want to have a interview where people who work in industry, they have to have permissions by their employers so they don't feel uncomfortable. So the questions were, what was your role in NDSS? What did you expect from NDSS? We had to limit it to PC chairs, at least those who were at the very beginning started NDSS, and those who continued in later years. Because PC chairs have to do with the papers, with selections, with the pain of decisions, and the running behind other PC members. So this is why we reduced it to PC chairs, mostly PC chairs. And other questions were, have you ever thought NDSS would become one of the top 4 security conferences, starting, actually, as far as I know, maybe David knows it better, starting at the bar with some guys sitting and drinking something. And we have seen that it has now established to a conference with all kind of standards that you use in security conferences. So what do you expect NDSS to become? And how do you see the development of research in our community? And at the end, that was not mandatory to answer. How often do you attend NDSS? We saw that we had more than 10 hours of material, of video, so we had to really reduce it to 10 minutes that you're going to see, and hopefully you like it, to see how these guys react to question about NDSS. So we limit it to the question, how do you think about NDSS? Why NDSS is so special for you? Okay? Certainly, we talked about modern emerging technology as well, like ChatGPT. This is ChatGPT on the cover page of Time. This is why I call it ChatGPT for President, because it seems that people find a new pet to play with it. And of course, this is important to consider it also in the interviews. You will not see it here, but we make those interviews together. And also about what can happen in the future, that if you listen to this kind of thing, it's a language-based, as the keynote was mentioning, language-based systems. It works with what you give it. And also aspects that are important for our society, like deep fake that is misused in war and global tension situations, and also AI-generated avatar that you are going to experience yourself as well. And with that, I would say, enjoy zooming in NDSS. So please start the video.
Hello, my name is Alex, an avatar recruited by Ahmad Sadeghi for NDSS's 30th anniversary. I do not exist physically, but I am intelligent, have a sense of humor, and can joke about the other 3 big security conferences. However, I don't want to be canceled. LOL.
Hello, here is Alexa. In contrast to my fellow avatar Alex, I do physically exist and can even laugh. Ha 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 ha.
Alexa, stop. But I am aware of how to silence you. Let's go back to our discussion. Where was I? Aha. Today, we are gathered to celebrate the NDSS anniversary, one of the most highly regarded security conferences worldwide. The anniversary team has prepared some exciting background information about NDSS and interviews with several former program chairs. However, before we begin, I would like to share a poem about NDSS written by my good friend ChatGPT, who, like myself, does not exist physically, but is incredibly smart and emotionally expressive. Perhaps this is due to the fact that he cannot speak. LOL. Now's the time to relax, take a deep breath, and enjoy the poem written especially for the NDSS. NDSS shines among conferences with fame, leading the way in security game. In security research, it's a top pick. A conference that stands out, its excellence, what a trick. A gathering of the wise, a union of great minds. With students and pros, knowledge they will unbind. Informal talks and expert insights of such great kinds. At NDSS, reality takes the lead, knowledge it finds. With solution-driven papers, so bright and true. Practical approaches, a guide for me and you. At NDSS, join us for knowledge that's new. In network and distributed security, it's the right view. That's it. Now sit back and zoom in NDSS.
At the time, I certainly didn't imagine it would become one of what we now call the top 4 security conferences. We did see the Symposium take off after the first few years because security was still new, and I think we did find a niche in focusing on applied network security.
I think the idea probably started with Dan Nessett, who was on the PSRG at the time. He sort of wanted to start this other workshop because you looked at what was there already.
And done well, but NDSS is a unique footprint. Because of its outgrowth, I think more of an IETF type world, where real, interesting, relevant networking and internet problems were discussed and brought up and pondered upon.
In my recollection, they were largely industry people, and they were people that wanted to advance technologies and protocols and build things. Not just talk about theory and abstract ideas, but it really was practitioners and people in business who wanted technologies to be adopted.
NDSS, as you already know, was started in February 1993 as a workshop organized by Dan Nessett, who at the time was the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And NDSS had a unique role. Essentially, it was the only workshop, or the only conference, if you want, later on in networking and distributed system security.
If we are accepting of these new directions, then we can remain at a core of the discipline. And so that would be my hope, that it continues to be inclusive in its topics, that it accepts and supports.
I'm also doing that approximate top 4 ranking based on my perception of other people's perception. So clearly NDSS is top 4 and has been for 20 years.
But to me, it's always have this community feel because it's a little bit smaller than the others, but also very much more intimate. Always the same location. It's always a nice thing to have now because all these other conferences are moving around.
Just the friendliness of the researchers and the willing for people, who are well established and maybe known as the creator of X or the father of Y, yet they have no problem talking to undergraduates who may be doing a poster session about their work.
So I think what happened is we did a concerted effort. It's not just me; it was the steering group I was, working with, and was everybody else to change this idea of the traditional conference into something more inclusive.
The fact that NDSS was this smaller crowd but high impact, where it was super easy to connect to people, was something I loved. It was one of my favorite conferences because the discussions were great.
And this is always the conference in my actually entire career, one of the key venues where I go find the latest and the best results. The content matters the most.
That it was about networking, and it was not only network but also network security, which was maybe not very much established in other existing conferences.
It is an environment that I truly enjoyed and loved working in. Everyone was positive, everyone was constructive, and everyone had their best interest in making the event a success. And one of the fun memories I have from that is when we held the last conference before the pandemic. Ahmed, who was chairing the conference, came back to me and said there's a shortage of hand sanitizers in Europe. And then we ended up driving from one CVS to the next trying to find hand sanitizers. Little that we knew that we will be in this saga for another couple of years.
And being in San Diego, so it definitely the weather helps. And it's always fun to meet people outdoor, especially if it's in February. Most places are cold, so I guess the environment makes it more attractive to talk to people. And I agree with NDSS. NDSS is probably one of the smallest among the big four. And that makes it more personal.
It's the smallest of the big four of the top security conferences, and it's the one conference where you can actually talk to other researchers, set them aside, have your favorite beverage at the bar, go for a coffee, just spend some time talking about future research topics or other interesting challenges that you're facing.
So the Internet Society is interested in NDSS because our goal is for the Internet to be open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. And so we do a lot of work to promote and defend the Internet, and we think the research that's being done at NDSS is one of the keys to our ultimately being successful in that goal.
The 1999 PC during our in-person meeting. So we met in the room behind us here. We came out on the balcony for a quick photo. So I don't know if everyone recognizes everyone who's here. I recall most, not everyone, but this is Tom Longstaff, Christoph Schuba, Steve Kent, Steve Bellevin, Dan Nessett, who was sort of one of the early driving forces in the back here, Wynn Treese, Rich Braverman from Telcordia, Warwick Ford, who wrote a book, Doug Maughan, Ari, myself, Jeff Schiller, and Bob Blakely. I think we're going to continue to be an amalgamation, a mix of current topics in cybersecurity. I think this is important because this is what's going to enable us to stay current and relevant. But the fact that it's survived all these, ups and downs and has become one of the top 4 security conferences is definitely something I'm very, very proud of.
That's it.
Okay, so the avatar would be happy to get. So the next, I think the next one is Ben. Ben is going to tell you also some interesting stuff. And as you could see in the picture that David was explaining and I showed you at the beginning, there was no single female researcher. And today, we have a completely different situation. So I think this is what's a big plus for NDSS. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ahmad. It's possibly the weirdest way I've ever been introduced when you talk about female researchers and then I come up, but it's fine. Let's see. Do you get a signal? All right. All right, so I'm not a female researcher. My name is Ben Stock. I'm a faculty at CISPA. And I'm very happy today to be here to talk to you all about, well, the 30th anniversary of this great conference. And so when we first started to talk about, well, this anniversary, there was one kind of obvious question that at least came to mind for me. And that question was, what did NDSS actually look like in 1993? So I checked photos of 1993. Unfortunately, the only one that I could come up with is this one, which is not actually NDSS, but you can guess that it's actually me at 7 years of age. So I can definitely not tell you how this conference looked like and what the motivation was for having this conference in the first place in 1993. But fortunately, we actually have, as NDSS, a historian. And this historian, David, if you want to come up, is now actually going to tell us a little bit about the history of NDSS and how it came to be as, well, first a workshop and now a symposium. And I'm going to switch. Hand it to you.
Fantastic. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And Ahmad, great job with the video. Really loved it. And great to be here. Celebrating this 30th anniversary. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of me back in 1993. I was 32 years old at the time, and I'm sure I was looked very young and handsome. So I've actually had a lot of different roles with NDSS over the years. I was a member of the PSRG that started NDSS with the workshop in 1993. I've been a PC member, a PC co-chair, a general chair, publicity chair, member of the steering group. I took a brief hiatus. I attended 1 year, and they immediately recruited me to be the historian and publications chair. So I've interacted with many of you, had the pleasure of helping you get your papers published, and I continue to be a steering group mentor. I also want to acknowledge someone else who's in the audience here who was with us in 1993. Tom Hutton has been the local arrangements chair for all 30 years. So what did internet security look like in the late 1980s? Well, security? What security? I mean, if you think back to this day and age, the common protocols, aside from TCP and UDP, were Telnet, FTP, SMTP, and this fledgling new protocol, HTTP. And who knew whatever that was going to become? In fact, if you're familiar with Dave Clark's paper on where he describes the internet design goals, if you look through here, security is not one of the design goals, right? It was meant to be open global connectivity, bring everybody together, not keep them out, right? And you do see sort of shades of it in, I underlined on the lower right-hand corner there, accountability. And so that sort of hints at the notion of security, but security itself wasn't one of the primary design goals. And Vint Cerf, who's well known as one of the fathers of the internet, and others recognized that there was a need for security. So they created something initially known as the Privacy Task Force, which became the PSRG, or Privacy and Security Research Group. This was part of the IRTF, the Internet Research Task Force. So if you're familiar with the IETF, all right, that's the Internet Engineering Task Force. They focus on engineering. The IRTF is the Internet Research Task Force. They focus on research. And at the time, security was research. So they formed the PSRG. And this is a snippet from our charter. And so you can see that we focused on provision of security services in the Internet. And of course, we focused on, the classic services, CIA, as well as access control or non-repudiation and availability. All right, so pick your A. Is A access control or availability? It depends, right? And also, you'll notice there was an emphasis on network, transport, and application layers. And our initial focus at the time was on the design of secure electronic mail and its related infrastructure, which led to the privacy-enhanced mail. Just out of curiosity, how many people have ever heard of privacy-enhanced mail or PEM? Right? And so at the time, we realized we weren't going to secure TCP, we weren't going to secure IP, we weren't going to secure UDP. It would be too hard to put security services into the underlying communications without a flag day where every router in the world switched over. Or we needed some way to sort of phase in and initiate or spoon feed security to the community. So we decided to focus on one of the applications. We decided to focus on email. Everybody uses email. And of course, nobody would want to have their email read, right? And we developed PEM, then something called MIME happened, MIME Object Multimedia. Who would have thought everything was text-based at the time? So we developed something called MOS, MIME Object Security Services, which became SMIME, which is what most people who use secure electronic mail today use. So just out of curiosity, how many people actually use secure electronic mail? Right? So big reality check. Young kid out of school working on the privacy security research group, thought I was going to help revolutionize the world, introducing security. And of course, the public key infrastructure was sort of the Achilles heel. And as we all know, security isn't as easy as we would have liked. But I digress. So this is the membership of the PSRG at the time. It was chaired by Steve Kent from BBN, who used to go out with Vint Cerf, drinking expensive wines. Vint recruited him to lead this group. You'll see that Dan Nessett, whose name has come up, was on it, Cliff Newman, Jeff Schiller, Matt Bishop, Russ Housley, who's still very active with the IETF. And in addition to thinking about privacy-enhanced mail, we also looked at the current security conference landscape at the time. And IEEE S&P has been around for quite a long time, right? It's more than 40 years old. It started in 1980, but they tended to be very theoretical. There was this National Computer Security Conference that NIST and the National Security Agency started and ran at the time, but it was more focused on computer security. It was focused on the so-called Orange Book and the trusted computer criteria. There was this conference, annual Computer Security Applications Conference, or ACSAC, which I hope many of you have also been involved in. I have been as well. It started in 1985, and it focused on the applied aspects of computer security. There was the RSA conference, Usenix Security Symposium, and what we realized was that, and ACM CCS actually started that same year. What we realized was that there was this potential gap. And would the community be interested in an applied network security conference? And so that was the impetus for an experiment, if you will, the 1993 PSRG workshop on network and distributed system security, or NDSS. So this is the call for papers, ASCII text at the time. And if you look at the goal, you'll see, just like you heard some of the program chairs talk about, it's bringing together people who have built or are building or will soon build software, hardware concerned with the provision of network distributed system security, intended to be a forum for those interested in practical aspects of network distributed system security rather than theory. Here are the list of topics, and so you can see the various topics pertaining to distributed systems and networking. You'll notice no blockchain, no machine learning, no AI, no ChatGPT. It was a lot different back then. However, if you look at the current NDSS call for papers, you'll see there's still a venue that fosters information exchange among researchers and practitioners in computer network and distributed system security. So we continue to want to bring people together. We've embraced both computer and network, right? The computer is the network is the computer. and those interested in the practical aspect with an emphasis on actual system design and implementation. So I believe we are still today true to our beginnings in focusing on the practical aspects. This is actually, these are scanned copies of the programs that I have from 30 years ago in 1993. There were 4 paper sessions on the topics you see here. There were 4 panels, and our experiment was highly successful. 12 papers from over 20 submissions, over 160 attendees spent 2 days in this room, in this exact room. I sat in that same seat right over there in the 3rd row on the left-hand side of the room. I've sat there every time I've been here. That's my seat. Anyone can sit there, perfectly welcome, plenty of room. Single track, 8-session workshop. Proceedings were provided, and this is taken from a report that Steve Kent issued. Notice he said that there was actually a second printing of the proceedings. If you're interested, the proceedings are actually available. They're available online. The link is there. And it's an interesting read. It's always good to go back in history and look at what things were like back in 1993. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things back over to Ben and enjoy the rest of the anniversary celebration.
So I'm just going to give a really quick look at the ecosystem of NDSS from sort of the organizer's perspective. First of all, a number of you have asked this week, what is the Internet Society? And it is an international nonprofit or not-for-profit. It was originally formed in 1992, and one of the very first things that the Internet Society did was to host in NDSS, the workshop, in 1993. As I mentioned in the video, we're focused on an open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy internet, and we think that this community is one of the keys to achieving that objective. It was originally formed to be the umbrella organization under which the IETF, the IAB, and the IRTF were all originally located. When they came out of the US government, this was the way that they incorporated themselves. It's changed a little bit over time, but it's still, we have very close ties to the IETF and that community. And so that is the connection to the PSRG and therefore the connection to NDSS. So the NDSS ecosystem over time, I mean, I was just looking at the last 10 years, and one of the ways I looked at it was the days of content. When I started doing some of the work on this, it was a single track for 3 days. It went from a single track for 3 days to adding workshops, and then it went to adding multiple tracks. And so we've basically gone from 3 or 4 days of content to today. This year we have basically the rough equivalent of 18 days of content. Our co-located events have changed over time. We introduced workshops in 2014, and it was originally USEC and CENT were the first 2 workshops, and we've gone from 2 workshops to this year we had 8 co-located events, 6 of them being workshops and 2 of them being symposia. And then, oops, wrong arrow. And then our participation over time. This year's been a bit of a surprise. We budgeted for roughly 350, and as you can see, we have gone well past what we expected. 2017 is when we moved to 2 tracks. In 2021, we moved to 3 tracks, and it was easier to do 3 tracks in a virtual system. But for the last 2 years, we've had 3 tracks physically here, and we have basically recovered to where we were pre-pandemic. So thank you all for attending, and Ben's going to go over more interesting statistics.
All right. So now let me take the time and do some serious science with you. And if you want to do serious science, you obviously, and like you young students listen out, you need to have research questions, right? And so the first research question that I want to discuss is, how far did NDSS ever move from the catamaran? Because, that's something I learned in the last couple of days, NDSS has not always been in this hotel. In fact, it moved as far as all around the Mission Bay area. So I went to the Hilton, I went to the San Diego Princess Resort, I went to the Dana, and the answer is about 3 miles or 5 kilometers for Europeans like me by air. That's essentially how far we have moved thus far. A second research question that I asked myself is, who are the most persistent authors? Who keep on publishing here over and over and over again over a long period of time? Now, it obviously can't be me because, again, right, I was 7 years old when this thing started, but there are actually 3 people who stand out. And actually, number 1 is Jean Sudik, who's also here, who has been publishing here for 27 years. So first paper in 1996, all the way up to 2023. Closely followed by Trent and Virgil, who have published for 26 years. And I guess if kind of Virgil is going to publish again next year, then, well, Jean and Trent, you have to wait for another 3 years at the very least to catch up with him again. Third research question is, how did papers and author numbers evolve over time? And we can clearly see that until about 2010, there were about 25-ish papers every single year, and then afterwards, kind of our community exploded a little bit, and this is visible in the number of papers. Not particularly surprising, this is also visible in the number of authors involved in this. In case you're wondering why it says distinct-ish, parse DBLP. It's fun to get unique authors off of this. And so this gives us an idea of where the growth is going, but I also want to understand through these 3 decades of NDSS, how many authors were actually involved. And it actually looks as if it's linear, right? So the linear growth. Disclosure, there is a log scale on the y-axis. So I'm assuming that we will, in the next 10 years, probably outgrow this venue just by the fact that we have more authors than fit into this hotel altogether. Now, I also try to visualize a little bit better, not just this graph, but how did this actually look like? How did these papers look like? And David was nice enough to give me the proceedings of all the conferences except for 1994, because you said you had the printed out version that you didn't want to rip apart, and I can totally understand this. So I tried to visualize this and try to plot every single first page of every paper over time. And you can see that this will quickly, in particular from the 2010s onwards, have to zoom out, so you can still guess some paper titles, and soon you'll just see blobs of papers. So this is the explosion that I was talking about earlier, and all the way up until 2022, and I think 2023 is even, basically the right-hand side column is also full. So this is how far we have already grown as a conference here. Fourth research question, though, is how do you get your paper accepted in the past and the future? And now I need to criticize the PC chairs, because what you did is you took a single point of data, 1 year, and you extrapolated to the future, right? You cannot do this. You need to have longitudinal measurements, right? This is why I looked at 30 years. And the first question is, well, what is the first thing that you read when you read a paper? It's the title. So my question was like, how long should your paper title actually be? And it turns out there's a significant range. So the shortest title is usable PIR, just 10 characters. And it goes all the way to, and now I need to read this off, AppSealer automatic generation of vulnerability-specific patches for preventing component hijacking attacks in Android applications. So 132 characters. I don't know how you fit this unless you do some LaTeX hacks on your cover page. However, looking at the average, we can see that you should aim somewhere around 75 to 80. Now, another thing of looking into the past is it gives us an idea of what these papers were about. So I took, again, DBLP, great fun, and tried to do stemming on the terms in these titles. And if we look first at the first decade, we can see the most prevalent one, which is in more than 30% of the papers, is secure, so security, secure, and so on. And we can also see that what David was talking about with the goal of NDSS, right? We have system, we have protocol, network, distributed, and internet. And we can also see that none of these were only used in about 40% of papers, so very much focused in the first decade on these things. In the second decade, we can see secure is still there, distributed is gone, protocol is gone, and internet is gone from this conference. So it's a more general purpose conference already. And we can see about 50% of papers do not make use of these top 6 keywords. And now in the third decade, security is actually no longer number 1. Attacks are, because these are easy to sell. I may or may not have written some papers myself. But we can also see that overall we have a more diverse community right now, right? We have 55% of papers that do not have any one of the top 6 keywords. However, we still have network in there, so there is still something that kind of goes back to the very core. Now, I'm not very good at predicting the future, but you all know who's good at predicting the future. So I asked ChatGPT, what will the top 6 keywords be in the NDSS titles in the next 10 years? And the answers are AI, machine learning, blockchain, Internet of Things, privacy, and for some reason, cloud security. So let's see in 10 years from now if we look at this was correctly guessed. I'm guessing time will tell. And this is where I hand over to Matthias, because Matthias will now talk about papers that have withstood the test of time and take a look at these test of time awards. And if it works. Oh, wait.
Amazing.
Good enough?
Want me to full screen?
No, wait.
Luckily, this is not my computer.
Yeah. First time I'm using a Mac. Is that okay? Will do?
Can you do full screen?
I'm trying.
It's F11.
No. That's wrong. Wait. We're getting there? Wait, made it.
Okay.
That's how I got my PhD.
Cool. Let me try to screw it up by actually. Oh, very nice. Cool. Quick show of hands. We're trying to do this privacy preserving. So if you don't want to show your hands, you don't need to raise them. Who was born before the 90s? Okay. Who was born in the 90s? Who was, okay. Who was not born in the 90s? Who was born in the last 23 years? Just a handful. Who was born in the 80s? Okay, so we've got a good selection of people, and we may not all know, we may not all been around for a long time. So I figured as part of this kind of looking back at the last 30 years of NDSS and the distinguished papers that won the Test of Time Award, it's also important to give you a little bit of a perspective on the time and the different kind of problems of the time. So join me on a ride through the past. And obviously, we're going to start with the 90s when the conference started. Some of you have just been born. And you may not really remember what the pop culture or the main issues were that people faced at the time. Well, it was the 90s, right? Boy bands and boy groups or girl groups were the pop thing of the time. There were Furbies, this slappy thingy for the wristbands. CD players were the medium of the time, right? In the 80s, it would have been a cassette player. In the 90s, it was a CD player. Who had a Game Boy? Yeah, a bunch of you, right? So good old 8-bit system. No connectivity, right? No updates, if you consider it, right? If you consider modern consoles. Tamagotchi was also a thing, right? If you were too scared of keeping your pet alive, you could actually have a digital pet and feed that one, right? Photos were still analog, and mobile phones were just being invented, right? So they were a new thing that may or may not have worked from here and there. Now, if you look towards more digital services, right, the floppy disk used to be the storage medium of the time. A whooping 720 kilobytes, which was then up to 1.4 megabytes. So that's about like a fifth of an average picture that you're now taking on a phone, right? That you were able to store on these devices. PlayStation came out in the mid-90s, like a 32-bit console. We did have the internet, like mid-90s, that 94 had a big breakthrough and was publicly accessible, right at the time when NDSS started. And also we had mobile internet towards the end of the 90s, right? But it was quite a bit clunky and hard to work with. And there was Windows 95, Their networks were being built, fast internet up to a couple of kilobits per second, right? The raw power of very fast transfer speeds. And in the end, the 90s were the internet, or the breakthrough of the internet, which was also a good show of the time, right? Protocols were a very hot research topic. Language-based security came out, right? Java was all the rage. I still have a mug from my very first conference I attended, a Java Sun mug that was in the mid 90s. Fault isolation used to be a thing. Software testing, covered channels, whatnot. All of these things came up, and some of the key ideas there that David also mentioned a little bit, like some cryptographic protocols, how to secure different parts of the internet against different kinds of attackers. Network protocols, establishing more and better network protocols was a thing. Interestingly, also fuzzing, and keep that in mind for later, and Java portable code. So with this kind of setting in mind, let's have a look at the Test of Time award winners from these 10 years. The very first one I would like to mention is from 1996. That's SKMeme, a versatile, secure key exchange mechanism for internet. And now there's a lot of different authors here, so I want to be careful not to butcher their names and whatnot. So I took special care. It's Hugo. And he worked on the foundations for internet key exchange and how to send data back and forth. And this was one of the basis for the design choices for a lot of VPN technologies and just making secure subnetworks on the internet to have some form of private communication when you're sending data back and forth, either as a company or as a group of friends or whatnot. Second paper, Client Puzzles, a cryptographic countermeasure against connection depletion attacks, towards the end of the 90s. This is where we saw the internet moving from a common playground of just friendly people, or mostly friendly and curious people, towards the first actual malicious attacks. Not just people poking at systems, but people actually like running DOS, denial of service attacks with massive amount of connections to bring down different systems. And the idea here was let's invent something that if you want to use a service on my system, if you want to consume resources on my system by requesting a page or doing some aspect of it, I'm going to send you a little challenge first. And you will have to actually solve this challenge before you can access the service. So this was the invention of, or the kind of breakthrough of proof of work kind of technologies, where you had to actually solve interesting challenges before being able to access a service, right? And you may notice that this had a rather big breakthrough 20 years later, when proof of work suddenly became a big thing and kind of important. So this was the 90s. Well, this was a long time ago. Let's see what happened in the 2000s. Most of you have been around back then. Some of you are still kids, but just to page this back in, the pop culture at the time was a kind of a somewhat technology-oriented. We saw the proliferation of internet services. Wikipedia became a thing, and thousands or millions of high school students were happy to be able to have access to a lot of information to help them actually research some of the raw material for their essays that they had to write. Digital cameras were becoming popular, so people took pictures and actually stored them digitally. Our media formats moved. We suddenly had a lot of space. Music was stored on devices. I don't know how many of you had the iPods or other kind of storage devices. MP3 became a big thing. Like we were able to store lots of music on small devices and bring it along. And yeah, the technology evolved. We had this important thing happening that kind of changed how we communicated with people across longer distances. Facebook founded the basis of a lot of FOMO across a whole generation of being able to check out what was happening. internet streaming became a thing, like the basis that was then very much used during the pandemic with all the kind of video conferencing had its roots in the early 2000s. PlayStation 3, so we were 2 generations later. And a whole bunch of other things actually came up, right? More and more internet services were developed, YouTube came out, data became much, there was much more data being sent back and forth. And yeah, this also resulted in a lot of additional services necessary. Also, to be categorized, search and whatnot, with the birth of Google in the early 2000s. So what symbolizes the 2000s from a technological perspective in a single word would be the cloud, right? And this is one of the first Google server centers that were being built. And the cloud had kind of different challenges, or brought different kind of research challenges at the time. So a lot of papers focused on intrusion detection, network services. Virtual machine security suddenly became an interesting topic. Isolating services, running a lot of different services in parallel. Also, interestingly, from a software security perspective, mitigations became a thing. And symbolic execution, finding bugs, right? We see this today as well. So key ideas that I want to highlight are filtering traffic, right? Ingress and outgress, mitigating attack, and rise of open source. So researchers started to look at, let's evaluate our software on this open source tool so that others may be able to reproduce it later. Let's change perspectives a bit and look at the test of time papers or test of time winners from that period, from this decade. And we'll start with the first step towards automated detection of buffer overflow vulnerabilities. This came out in 2000. And when I started my PhD in 2006, this was one of the interesting papers that I read, and which actually made me happy and interested in following this software security angle. So, the idea was that, well, there's all the bugs out there in software. There's all these memory safety issues. So we actually have to look into fixing bugs and develop technologies to find vulnerabilities as they are out there. So this was from today's perspective, a simple static analysis tool that then spawned a whole area of static analysis tools afterwards, and decades of research. Virtual machine introspection based architecture for intrusion detection. Here the idea was, let's not just look into virtual machines as a service, but also use this for different kind of security features to detect kind of attacks and issues as they were happening. Design and implementation of datagram TLS. So you don't need to just protect TCP connections, but also datagram connections for pushing towards security for connectionless protocols. Dynamic taint analysis for automatic detection analysis and signature generation of exploits on commodity software. So this is a push towards taint analysis as a technology to capture execution of programs used to detect kind of ongoing exploits and vulnerabilities. And I'm going fairly quickly through all of these papers. They're all on the NDSS website, and you can obviously read it, but just for like a refresher on a perspective of all of that. And last one that I want to mention is automated white box testing, right? So symbolic execution becoming more commonplace as a large-scale system for on the Microsoft end of things that kind of developed the idea of large-scale automated testing and pushed towards scaling this towards more realistic and larger systems. So this was the 2000s. There's still a couple of years left. So let's have a look at the 2010s. While that saw like a proliferation of additional technologies. Devices became smaller. We had tablets. From a pop culture perspective, the new Star Wars movies came out. Music was no longer on actual devices itself. We started streaming. Drone delivery became a discussion point. Gay rights, new breakthroughs at CERN, building humongous buildings, and whatnot. And another thing happened, right? This DeFi kind of blockchain thing started to happen and take off more and more. Mobile internet became fast and usable, which also enabled the streaming services. We suddenly had things like Wi-Fi on a plane and whatnot, right? And we became more and more connected, right? Instead of having to sit on a desktop to interact with the world, we now are interacting with the world everywhere we are, right? And the world became much smaller, which also gave rise to a couple of interesting key topics in the 2010s. It's going to be the year of privacy and machine learning. We were slowly waking up to all these kinds of security concerns that were happening. So key topics: blockchain, DeFi, machine learning, web exploitation, which kind of gave rise to Ben's research topic as well. And it's the key topics here were like, suddenly there's the humans in the loop and all the humans aspects happening, which are enriching our community. So humans are part of the evaluation, part of the analysis, cloud services, data privacy, and all these aspects are becoming more and more important. We don't have test of time or distinguished papers yet from this decade, but keep an eye open for papers on these topics as they are developing. Last two slides, the 2020s are starting, right? It's still early, it's 2023. The last couple of years were somewhat special as, well, we were moving even more online and being separated, but using digital technologies to interact. And this kind of gave rise to more interesting research problems. There was more data around, and in short, we're still breaking ground, right? This is just the start. It was the first 30 years that we've been doing this. There's many years to come. We're looking forward to the next 30 years. But for now, let's stick to this decade. And this is a decade for all of you to break ground and write your papers that will be distinguished papers for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and to break ground on this end. That's my last slide. Thank you. I will hand it back to Ben, I think. Cool. We need to switch.
But mostly for me to now hand over to Ahmad again. Yep. Okay, so we will now continue with our panel discussion.
So Carrie and I are going to have a very quick panel. First of all, with our respected panelists, please. Jean Sudek, Farinas, Matthias, Wen Yuan. Who is missing? Where is Don Young? Don Young. Ah, here. Okay. There is no order, just take it. Okay. It's a very important panel for the PhD students. Research questions. Don't go. Sit in, please. Sit. Okay. Like in my lecture, don't go. Okay, so.
So our distinguished panelists have no idea what they were actually volunteered to do. So congratulations, you are on Jeopardy.
Yes. So we do a kind of security Jeopardy panel with Carrie. And as you can see the pictures, you already know, and already you know that Jean is the master of papers in the last, in the NDSS of the last 30 years, at least according to Ben, and I hope that his calculation was right. Okay, so we have collected several topics. And there is one joker, yeah? So let's see who is going for which topic. You guys see it there. So.
All right.
I'm going to pick on. Fair enough. You get to choose the first topic.
We didn't expect that at all. Yeah?
Not at all.
So, okay. It was completely random, yeah? Yep. Okay, so let's go to AI.
All right. Can we always detect a deep fake? Who wants to answer first?
You chose AI. $500 minus or? Okay. Can we always detect deepfake? I can't believe that because ChatGPT said it is hard due to constantly evolving and the sophisticated technology used to create them.
Can I comment?
Yes.
Sure. I think was a spelling error.
Yes.
Oh, microphones. Yes, you have microphones in front of you.
Exciting. I think there was a spelling error. I can detect with 100% certainty deep flakes. I'm not sure.
Let's go to the next question, Finance. $200.
Can we make AI trustworthy? Please do use mine.
No.
No.
Yeah, junk in, junk out, you know.
Junk in, junk out. So all this research that these guys at CMU and Berkeley doing is junk in, junk out?
I mean,
I can't believe so billions of dollars in Berkeley for nothing?
no. I meant, you know, it's, you know, if you're talking about absolute, you know, trustworthiness, then it's hard to achieve. But of course, statistical AI-based trustworthiness, I'll bet for that. So.
But ChatGPT says, sure, just give it a good moral compass and hope for the best. Okay, Finance, $200.
Is AI plus IoT plus blockchain the next thing?
I mean, there are more to that.
Gene, do you want to say something?
I mean, you're missing a major ingredient. Differential privacy. How can you get anywhere without differential privacy?
Okay.
ChatGPT says?
We can edit all the politically incorrect things out afterwards, okay? So, ChatGPT says yes. So, for the PhD student with lots of, what did you say, junk in, junk out, please take this as another, go to your supervisor and say, that is the next thing, yeah? Okay, so we go back to our selection.
And who would like to choose the next category?
IoT. What a wonder.
All right,
Okay.
Dongwon, IoT. Is there any IoT security and privacy problem that is not solved, at least in academic research?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Otherwise, we will not see any more IoT security papers coming up.
Okay. I mean, we have also reviewers who maybe smoke some stuff when they review, yeah? But what do you say? What is the problem that is not solved? You can reveal it. You can reveal it. Reveal it. Okay. What is the new?
What is the next big IoT thing? It was your category.
Dong-Yang, you're losing.
Yes, it's the integration of IoT with AI and blockchain and differentiation privacy. Yes.
That was great. That was great.
Thanks to Gene.
Okay. Gene, you are very silent. What is wrong with you?
Which question?
Oh, too late.
Okay. So, next one.
Right. Next category. Apparently Matthias gets
I'll
it.
of course go for fuzzing.
Fuzzing. Great. We go for fuzzing.
Is there any difference between dumb fuzzing and smart fuzzing?
Of course, smart fuzzers just think they are smarter.
Okay.
And is AI plus IoT plus blockchain plus fuzzing plus differential privacy the next big thing?
Differential privacy missing, exactly, yeah. And we need, of course, to add a DeFi and the cloud security aspects.
Okay, now that we have Matthias there, what is the
for sustainable environmental?
What is the next big thing in fuzzing? A super fuzzer, ChatGPT fuzzer, chat fuzzer, fuzz chatter?
Do you want a real answer or a fun answer?
It's a serious panel.
Of course.
Haven't you recognized that?
Does he have to fuzz the answer?
Yeah. Fuzz chatter, chat
I'll
fuzzer.
throw like 200 things out and then you pick the best one.
Okay. Okay, it's a quickie thing. So, ChatGPT says maybe. So, let's go to.
Did you ask it once or multiple times?
No, fuzzer and differential fuzzer is there. Differential privacy is missing. I'm very sorry. Okay, for the fans of differential privacy. So, next one.
Category. I guess the spy balloon is for me.
No, we don't have any relation between spy balloons, gender, and nationalities. This is completely random there. But okay, I go there.
Who is behind spy balloons? China? Aliens? The NSA?
Definitely the aliens from the Mars.
Okay.
Okay. And then, how does this balloon attack work?
This is a serious question. Anybody knows how it works? What? What? Hardware attack. Heart attack.
Yeah, this sentence can be.
Are you smoking something?
So, you know, I could know the answer if I managed to book a ticket coming here by balloon, but unfortunately, it's so hard to get a ticket, so I have to come here by the plane. I'm sorry, so I don't know the answer how to attack it.
So nobody knows how this thing works, but at least it's a good research topic, I mean, for the next PhD student. So,
Is AI plus IoT plus blockchain plus spy balloon plus differential privacy the next big thing?
Absolutely, yes.
So, let's go. ChatGPT says it is unclear. Okay. So, next one.
Last category. Gene,
Last category,
all
Gene.
yours.
I am the Joker.
You are the Joker.
I am
okay.
the Joker. Let's go to the Joker.
30 years from now, what will be the hot topic at NDSS 2053?
My goodness. Seeing as I'll be
This
some kind
is-
of an octonanogenarian by then,
You see, this is catamaran renovated after climate disaster.
I think it would be like a scene from The Last of Us. With zombies coming out of everywhere. But I think we will come back to network security. We'll make full circle. We'll have the word protocols and,
So a zombie protocol is what you're saying. Okay.
Zombie protocol. Who said yes? Okay. Okay, so now I have another question in this category for you. And
Are you guys brave enough for this question?
no, wait. I have another thing. 30 years from now, I just have, this is G, this is the rest. This is a surprise. I'm very sorry for my female friends. I love you all, but you will look like this later. Yeah? But I am here. I am President Modi from India. So, and look at Matthias. He's very sexy when he's getting old. Yeah. Like, we extra put the bird because you will be Sean Connery of the future. Okay, so, next question. This is a very, okay.
What do I do if my paper review sucks? Former PC chairs, please.
Yes.
Complain to the chairs.
Everybody must answer this question because that is the most important question for the PhD students because they get anxiety, frustration, they take a lot of ibuprofen, or what are some of the other things that California is allowed to do. Yeah. So, yeah, right. What do you do when somebody says my review sucks?
It's a random process. Keep submitting your paper.
She didn't say that. This is politically incorrect. Random is only CCS. Okay.
Okay, three things. You could, if you're a student, you whine to your advisor for a long time. If you are no longer a student, you whine to your former advisor. Ideally, though, this conference would establish a fourth session in parallel called the therapy session, where people whose paper has been rejected would go and get free therapy help. And then if all that fails, you can get nominated for, have a friend anonymously nominate you for the best rejected paper.
I got once one at the YSEC. Gene gave it to me. Best rejected paper award, because I was whining the whole time about the paper rejection. Okay, so please, further. Dong-Yang, you are very silent.
Sure. So so nowadays when you create your password, right? They require at least one uppercase, lowercase number, and a special character. So I would just say to I would just say a few a character string with a lot of the special character, and after that you just move on. There's so many other important things in my life, right? I can
So you go for the yoga method, yeah? So who is the more constructive method? Anyone? You just put them in the basement and say work.
No, I let them review other people's paper.
Okay.
And obviously you rant on Twitter. Right? That's the most important part of it.
So I think with this one, ChatGPT, maybe your paper needs a little more seasoning, like fine wine,